Our guest on STEMedia Live this weekend is Dr. Indira Turney, a Black Caribbean neuroscience, using her platform to discuss her journey to the PhD and beyond. Dr. Turney has got her bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of the Virgin Islands and a PhD in cognitive neuroscience from Penn State University. She is currently a postdoctoral researcher, neuroscientist at Columbia University Medical Center in New York City, and the Taub Institute of Research in Alzheimer's Disease and the Aging Brain. I appreciate the hearts coming, appreciate the love. Shout out to the questions. Y'all have questions to go. I'm about to, right now, introduce to some and present to others, none other than Dr. Indira Turney.
Hey, she made it. She made it. Everybody calm down. Calm down. Everybody. It's going to be okay. We have Dr. Turney is in the building. What's up, Indira?
I'm good. How are you? How are you?
Yeah. Oh, I'm great. I'm great. So you know what happened, right? Like, basically what happened is apparently Instagram has some sort of new, like, thing where you can, like, request, people can donate throughout the live or whatever. And I guess it's not, yeah. Yeah, which is cool, but it doesn't, I guess it doesn't allow you to bring somebody else on at the same time. So we had to do that little, yeah. But it's good to see you. Welcome to STEMedia Live.
I'm so happy to be
here. I'm happy to have you. Yo, this is Dr. Indira Turney, the neuroscientist herself. She's going to get into some of that, as we like to do. But Indira, let's go ahead and kick things off without wasting any more time and ask you our icebreaking question. Give us a random fun fact about yourself. What is something someone wouldn't expect to hear from a Black Caribbean neuroscientist?
Something very unexpected. I love Scotch.
Mm-hmm. You.
I love and I enjoy Scotch. And
yeah.
Honestly, the reason I love and enjoy Scotch, similar to stout, is because when you think of like Scotch and stout, what do you think of? Like, who enjoys
I don't know, man. I think about like poker. I don't know why. Like, cause that's like what my granddad used to do. Like, you know what I mean? The Scotch and poker. Like, that's what comes to my mind though. But go ahead. Well, like, give me your reason.
Caribbean, not many people drink Scotch. Especially stout. Like, for stout, it was always like for the men to make their back strong, right?
Yeah.
And then Scotch was like a white man's thing, and I was like, oh really? Bet. I'm gonna drink it, I'm gonna enjoy it, and then over time I've learned to love it. So that's how I started it.
Well, hey, listen, that is the first time someone just like, yo, it is what it is. I like Scotch, you know what I mean? Fight me, you know what I mean? Oh, I don't drink, but I am familiar. I'm familiar. So, but let me tell you something. Let me tell you again, I love the way you started it off because listen, you're not playing the games. You are who you are. You are a Black Caribbean neuroscientist that loves Scotch. And what? Say something. We all give her some heart, some love. Thank you so much for sharing that interesting factoid about yourself. You know what's also interesting? You are, here she is, right? Everybody check this out. She is a neuroscientist, a PhD neuroscientist. And something that I am familiar about your story is that you had a point in your life where you actually failed a class called Science 101.
Yes.
How in the world can somebody go from failing Science 101 to becoming a PhD doctor neuroscience? And so just go ahead and give us the origin story. Where did you start in this whole journey? Like, how give us some context. Color that a little bit for us.
That's a really good question. I think, before I get into the Science 101, when I went to college, first of all, I didn't go to college because I wanted to pursue higher education. I went to college because at the time I had a boyfriend who was going to college, and I was like, bet, then that's what we're going to do.
You going, I'm going. Yeah.
Right. So at first I actually applied to college in Boston University, and I was ready to go. And my dad, at the time when I graduated from the University of the Virgin, I was in the Virgin Islands.
Virgin Islands, okay.
When I graduated, I was 16, and I was ready to go to Boston University. And my dad was like, the hell you ain't.
You want to go from the islands to Boston. That's interesting. Shout out to Teresa, who had a similar path like that. But that's interesting that you even wanted to go.
Right? But my dad was like, no, you're not. And I was like, well, I wasn't trying to go for school anyway. So if I'm not going to go to Boston to get away from you, then I'm not going to go to college at all. And then I took kind of like a semester off, but really it was a rebellious 3-4 months where I just went to live with my mom on another island.
Which was like another Virgin Island,
Island,
right?
in the British Virgin Islands. So I went to Tortola,
Gotcha.
where my mom was.
Tortola.
And I was just like, you know, living, because my dad was like, I'm not going to deal with you, so go live with your mother. I was like, okay, cool, whatever. I'm not trying to go to this college thing anyways. So long story short, my grandmother passed away in November, and I had to go home for the funeral in Dominica, which is another Caribbean island. That's
where you're originally from, right?
That's where I'm originally from.
Right? Originally born. All right,
born
got you.
Raised until I was about 14 when I moved to the Virgin Islands.
All right.
Yeah. So then when I went home for the funeral, so now I'm in the U.S. Virgin Islands because I had a green card, so U.S. papers. So when I went home for the funeral, my dad had my green card, because that's how he kept it to control me.
Okay.
And he was like, the only way you're gonna come back from your grandmother's funeral is if you apply for grad school. For college, sorry. And I was like, okay, well, if that's all I have to do, then I'll apply for college, but only at the local university in the Virgin Islands, because he didn't want me to go off, at the University of the Virgin Islands, because he didn't want me to go off to the US, to the mainland, right? Because bad things happen there. Honestly, if I'm being 100% honest, the reason my dad didn't send me to college, I don't know if anyone on this call knows, but in 2006, when I graduated high school, do you know of Natalie Holloway?
Oh, that sounds familiar name. No, what happened to Natalie Holloway in 2006?
It was this white girl who went to Aruba for her class trip, and she got more or less, I still don't think the story was solved per se. I mean, someone went to like prison, I think, for her murder, but essentially it was this white woman, young lady, went for her class trip to Aruba, which is another Caribbean island, and she went missing. So my dad was like, you go to America, the land of opportunity, you go missing. And I was like, what is
opportunity for you to go missing?
Exactly.
Wow.
So, wow. I didn't go on my class trip. I didn't go on anything to do, you know, like your senior year and
right. That's when you go and like you experience everything. Yeah.
I didn't do none of that. My dad was like, nope.
Yeah. Dang. So just to kind of like make sure I understand. So so I was just gonna try to like recap. So you were born in Dominica. You were living in the Virgin Islands with your dad. You graduated from high school, and then you wanted to go to Boston in the States. And he was like, no, I don't need you to be missing like the Natalie girl. And you're like, fine, I'm not going to do college anyway. I don't know what happened to the boyfriend, because you did mention the boyfriend, but we can come back to him, right? And so he sends you to the British Virgin Islands to stay with your mom, Tortola. Shout out to Tortola. I got a friend whose family's from Tortola. British Virgin Islands. And then the only way you can get back to the United States, because the green card and everything, was that he said, if you apply to college, you can come back to your grandmother's funeral. Was it there?
Well, no. So my grandmother's funeral.
That was in Dominica.
It was that.
Dominica,
because I had to leave the U.S. territory to go.
Got you.
Into U.S. territory.
If you go to college.
Yeah.
Man, so you know that's interesting, right? Because I think on one hand he's like, man, he was definitely like overprotective, trying to keep a hand on you, but then at the same time, I guess you gotta give him credit because he got you in college, because you could have been working.
For sure.
You know what I mean? Somewhere else.
Him today, he would be like, if it wasn't for me, she wouldn't have been where she was. I mean, stories be told.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like I think my dad probably has like a 3rd grade education. So it wasn't necessarily from a place of, I want you to go and get an education. It was like the only thing he knew that had structure, that had some kind of future in mind.
System. Right. Yeah. Got you. And we're going to get to that because
So I was like, okay,
I'll do it, right? And we're working our way to the Science 101, because I'm assuming that was at UVI. But here's the thing, like you're in, I just got to throw this out there, like you were in St. Croix, correct?
Yes.
That's where UVI is. And a lot of people don't know, like, that's the HBCU, right? University of Virgin Islands.
HBCU outside of the United States of America.
The only one outside of the United States. So shout out to the HBCU fam out there. Fun fact in my regard, I went to St. Croix when I was in the 7th grade.
What?
With my pops, my dad. Yes, I was on St. Croix. I stayed in Christiansted, St. Croix. Christiansted, is that where you live? Since Christiansted, or like, or Frederickstead?
It was like mid-island, so I wasn't a West girl, I wasn't an East girl, I was in the middle.
Yeah. No, I went because my first grade teacher, and I won't get into my own story, but my first grade teacher was from St. Croix. And then like full circle event, shout out to one of my best friends actually from college, one of my study buddies in engineering. He was from St. Croix. So yeah, I know a little bit about the island out there.
Okay.
Yeah. I've even driven by that school. So I don't know if I must have driven. I mean, I was in seventh grade, so I don't know. Maybe you were still in.
You went to seventh grade for like a year in St. Croix, or you were?
So no, I didn't live there. So I went for a summer when I was in seventh grade to visit the teacher. Okay. Yeah. So I got to just walk around and I saw again like how safe. Going back to your story about your father, how safe it kind of felt around there, and like it doesn't really feel like nothing. I mean, I'm like a young boy walking down to the shops and just kind of checking out stuff. So I can imagine.
Christianstead, so you know.
Oh, shade on Christianstead. Nothing goes down in Christianstead, apparently. All right, well, hey, I have no allegiance. This is where I stayed. I did spend time in Frederickstead. Of course, we flew into St. Thomas and then took like this little small plane to St. Croix. We took a boat to St. John, saw the beautiful beaches there. Yeah. So it was all good. Yeah. So we could go on about Homeland. So let's talk though again. You went to college there, and for people who don't know, you actually graduated high school. I guess what's considered an early age for the States. Am I right?
Right. Yeah. So I was 16, and I think everyone else in college in the high school was 18. And then I started college because I took that semester off. I started at 7 following like spring semester.
Okay.
Like
gotcha.
16, but then I eventually became 17. Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. So you basically started college, which is making a little sense now with the context. You started college based on like, all right, whatever. This is what I got to do to come back. You just kind of went in. And so what was this version of Indira like freshman year college, early college?
Indira was interesting then. I mean, she's so interesting now, right? But essentially, so I started college because the first time I applied was because my boyfriend at the time was applying. And then over the course of not going to college with him, and you grow apart. I mean, it's like high school love, right? So we eventually broke up, and then I started college that spring semester. And after the first semester, we broke up. And so I started seeing some other guy. And I started because I took the SATs, but I didn't do very well. So I had to end up taking like those remedial courses. So like remedial math, remedial English. But then after like 2 weeks, you get to test out of those courses. And I tested out. But at the time, young love, this new guy, I was like, but this guy is in this course. So I'm like, I'm not going to test out. So you have the option of if you test out, you can take regular college courses. And I was like, no, I don't need to. I'm fine. I need to learn these basic concepts.
He had you staying in a remedial class for him? Oh, man, that must have been.
It was a terrible idea.
That is something. Okay. All right. No judgment here, but that's just interesting. That's an interesting detail there.
It was also a mixture of like, because like in those courses they made you feel like you're the smartest because you're like, oh, Indira and so because we were actually the two leaders of the course, and so they would always ask us to help the students, and so it was like and I was like,
you're like, all right, you know what I'm saying, I help them out real quick, you know what I'm saying, I get this, I got y'all. You were head of the class.
Young love, you have you stupid.
That young love, Teresa, she knows what she's talking about.
And so in that course, that first semester, that was the semester I took Science 101. So my first semester. And I just honestly just didn't pay attention to details. Like details were not my thing. In grad school, 5 years later, I found out that I have ADD. I didn't know what that was. But, in undergrad, like, I just didn't pay attention to details, like, because I would lose points for things that were very simple that if I just, paid attention to, it would have helped.
Right.
In labs and stuff. Like, it was the basic things, and you lose points. And it was kind of a weed out course for just a science major in general. And
Right.
so the professor, I got like a C, and if it's a C back home, you fail. So
Yeah.
fail. And so then I remember that second semester, my psychology, she was a psychology advisor. And
Yep.
so
Yep.
she said, hey, like, why are you failing Science 101? Like, that's not,
Right.
because I guess she saw potential in me in Psychology 101, but I was
Right.
also failing that course, almost. And I had a C, like, halfway through the semester as well. And so she was like, I know you can do better.
Right.
So what are
Right.
you doing? And so we started talking about, school and getting a little more serious about everything. And long story short, she was like, I feel like you have a knack for research, but you can't fail Science 101 if you, want to do research. And I was like, I don't even know what research is, but whatever, I'll try to do better. And then I got A's the next semester, so I retook Science 101, and I ended up with like a B+ in Psychology 101. And I actually transferred to psychology as a major because of her.
Got you.
Because she was she guided me through stuff. So she encouraged me to apply to different programs in the mainland, to go to like conferences, like Thurgood Marshall, like all those stuff, just to get a sense of what I wanted to do.
Right, what the research world, scientific world. Shout out to her, man. It's always great to have those heroes, those champions who don't pass you or write you off just from like on paper. Like, oh, she fell on Science 101, whatever. Like, she has no future. Let's let her do what she gonna do. She saw something in you, and obviously it wasn't a lack of intelligence, as you put it. Like, it was just effort, right? It was just you being like, all right, I'm actually about to open a book. I'm actually about to start studying. I'm not gonna brush this off. I'm not gonna stay below my potential just because other people are, or whatever, So I actually dig that. I dig that. And you, so you said you didn't hear what research was. Shout out to people giving the hearts. Keep them coming. This is great. Shout out to people on YouTube. Definitely make sure y'all give us the questions if you have any for a story. But just moving along, Indira, you were a person who didn't hear about research, but then you got introduced to a field of research that I guess you had a little bit of a personal connection to. Am I right? Was that there at UVI?
Yeah, I mean, so honestly, at the time, it's one of those things where in the moment, I didn't really have a true connection. So yes, I knew my grandmother had dementia, but I didn't know what it meant to study dementia. First of all, in the Caribbean, if my grandmother had dementia, all I knew is like she was senile. She was crazy. She didn't remember me. That's all I knew. And for the most part, the whole family thought she was lying, And it wasn't until I had to write, I think it was like my first summer research program, when they made us write a personal statement draft, and they were like, tell your story, like, why are you interested in this? And I made a connection, because I was like, well, now I know dementia is the brain, and I was in a neuroscience summer program, and so I was like, oh yeah, this makes sense, these are connections. But at the time, it wasn't like I set out to like start with, like, because my grandmother had dementia, I wanted to study dementia. It was more so I had to make up a story. It was a story that was very real to me, and now I could make sense of it. So for the first time, I made sense of my grandmother's dementia when I had to write a personal statement for applying to grad school. It was like a trial run, I think my sophomore year, during the program, that we had to like do a draft just to like, get a practice for applying to grad school. And then when I wrote that statement, honestly, that's when I made the connection to myself even.
You're like, oh yeah.
I could study what happened. I could understand how the brain functions across, as you get older, and how, what happens as it deteriorates and stuff like that. But it was more like constant, like circumstances came about.
Right. And I guess it is one of those things too. And I know y'all can relate to this. Like it's a progressive realization, right? It isn't always like, oh, this is my purpose and this is where I'm supposed to be. It's sort of like, you see a little bit here, then a little bit of light shine here. And I mean, you were traveling the world at this point too. Like, you've been sent to the United States, being able to present, I'm assuming, posters and like attend conferences. Yeah.
This goes back to my mentor too. Figure out what I was interested in. For me, it was just like opportunities to travel the world.
Right.
It was like,
for sure.
It was a matter of saying yes to my mentors, because I could have easily said no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's interesting, man. I think Indira, it's so important, right? Like it's so much that we don't know. Shout out to Teresa said, we're still trying to figure out mental health out here. And that's, I feel like in our community, sometimes we just kind of like, oh, well, yeah, they're tripping, you know what I mean? Or like something like that. And I actually have a personal experience, you know, before my grandmother passed, she actually dealt with Alzheimer's. And so I do remember kind of the period where it was like, you know, something's not right. You know, she used to cook, but then like, you know, things didn't always turn out as the same. And like, it just was kind of a different experience that we all had to be educated on. But you never forget. And when you learn, in fact, and when you have personal experiences with it, you begin to appreciate people like yourself who are working to really improve the lives and improve our understanding in these areas. And so I definitely think it's extremely valuable that the person, the young girl who, you know, registered for college just because her dad said, spell science 101 is now in this field of research, right? And so by the time you graduate, you were well like acquainted with this particular, I guess a little bit more acquainted with this world of research. And so what happened after like you got your degree? I'm assuming you got your bachelor's degree in psychology?
Yes. So
Okay, what happened after that?
Because of those summer research programs, that's when, so my first summer research program was very like psychology. It was social psych. It was,
Okay.
My first research project was why college students drink and how does that affect their brain.
What's up with the scotch? Like, why?
Right. I mean, like, honestly, like, not to put a bad rep on us, but like Caribbeans, we drink, right? And so
yeah.
For me, that was the immediate connection. I was like, oh, here's an opportunity to study human behavior. And I was like,
Right.
What do I know around me? Everyone drinks. What really happens with the brain? And then that project was it was pretty basic in the sense that I just had to like ask questions through surveys. And through that experience, I realized I didn't really care for that, you know, method of data collection, but I really wanted to understand what actually happens in the brain, not what people think is happening or how people think they feel, which I think both are very valid. So after that first experience, I also used that as an opportunity to go to conferences and present those research and get exposed to other neuroscience projects. And in that process was when I essentially decided, oh, I can actually study the actual brain, not just what people feel or what they think.
Right.
So
not just the social aspects. Yeah.
Exactly. So the second time around, the second summer, my junior year, I did the same summer research opportunity program, SROP. This time it was at the Ohio State University, and it was a neuroscience lab. And I absolutely loved it. Like, I was like, this is what I'm called to do. But it was in multiple sclerosis, and I was like, I could care less about multiple sclerosis, but I love the brain. It's fascinating, and in old people, I need to know more. And so that's what really sparked my interest in neuroscience. And that led me to eventually applying to grad school for neuroscience, in like a cognitive neuroscience program, because it wasn't a wet lab or anything like that.
So break that down if you would, and they're like, explain what is cognitive neuroscience. People see our topic, and so what exactly is cognitive neuroscience?
So essentially, if you think of neuroscience, it's the study of the brain. And when most people think of that, they think of like slicing the brain in the lab, like more, you know,
the cauliflower looking thing. Yeah.
I specifically do cognition. So the cognitive behavior that goes with what we think is involved in the brain. So we know the different parts of the brain, but what behavior are they responsible for that we can measure through different tasks. So for example, a very simple way to measure behavior or cognition would be to give someone to do something, to remember something, and see the parts of the brain that, I hate this term, but quote unquote, light up while they try to remember something. And that essentially tells you the brain regions that are involved in that process. So that's what my PhD was in both young adults and older adults. And then my dissertation specifically focused on this thing called false memories. So people are remembering things that never actually happened.
Got you. No, I feel you. Yeah. And like, that's almost like.
No, go ahead.
No, I didn't want to cut you off. Go ahead. And then that will let's what?
No, I was essentially saying that's more common in older people. And so my dissertation eventually helped old people have less false memories by training them and then seeing the different patterns within the brain that you know, you make different connections within the brain after training, which was pretty fascinating for a dissertation project. But Yeah. So what you were saying.
No, I saw the false memory thing as really interesting because, you know, you have some extreme stuff, right? Where in crime, where people are like, yeah, that guy mugged me or whatever. And it's like, no, that's just, you think he was a guy or he's similar to somebody you picture in your head, you know, like people
Mm-hmm.
who like go through that stuff. And then you also have like something more on the more lighter side where it's like, people like, yeah, you remember that movie where da 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 da? And I'm like, yeah, yeah, I saw that movie. And like, the truth of the matter is, like, I've never seen the movie, but like because of my association, I've been in enough conversations about it.
Exactly.
I feel like I actually saw the movie. And so, what is that though? Like, what is it that causes? Would you say that causes false memories and stuff like that, just at any age?
Yeah. So essentially, false memories. It's funny because a lot of people, there was this famous story in the news. This anchor, he was a news anchor, and he
Hmm.
remembered that he was in one of the helicopters that were blown down after one of the, I don't remember what the story was, but more or less it's essentially you're remembering things that are very similar to what happened. Or
Okay.
for example, if someone came to you and said, hey me, like when you were 5 years old, remember when we went
Right.
under the house and we were playing house and we were doing all these other things and we built
Oh,
this,
yeah.
spaceship. But in some time in your childhood, you built a spaceship. It may not have been with that person, but you built a spaceship. And at some other
Right.
childhood, you, I don't know, did something very similar with that person. So essentially the memories get mixed up because I mean our
You
memories is
start
not,
putting it together.
yeah,
Okay.
because our memories are not a record player, right? You don't just press play and it plays back. It plays back, and
Right.
every time we remember it, we add new
Hmm.
details to it. I'm pretty sure every time you tell a story, you always add, even if it's an extra word, an extra detail here or there, and eventually
Yeah.
becomes a new memory. So
An actual,
essentially, it's like,
wow.
yeah. So when things are so similar, just like in a more extreme case, on a crime scene,
Yep.
someone was very similar to the suspect who probably unfortunately raped someone, and they have the very similar facial features as someone, body
Mm.
build, maybe even like the
Yeah.
demeanor of that person. And again, there's other things that influence false memories, right? So like the emotions you had during that time. And so there was a
Yes.
big
Yes.
famous case where this woman, a white woman, accused a black man of raping her, and really
Mhm.
he just looked like the person. I mean, there's a whole other slew of things you can get into with like mixing up black
Right.
people, but
Yeah.
essentially it was because she mixed up his face to look like someone else that raped her.
Hmm.
And later, like 10 years I think later, DNA tests came out, was a thing, and he got exonerated, and now they have this like innocent
Wow.
person project or whatever. But it was
Yeah.
really, she just had a false memory. She falsely remembered
Right.
something that was very, very similar, or someone who looked
Right.
similar to who actually raped her. And people can go to jail for years, or it's
Because the
dangerous.
fall, it is. It definitely is. And like going back to, I guess the population that you particularly study, you know, aging, and I'm assuming that's like seniors and people who
Mm-hmm.
are later in age in their 70s, 80s, or what have you. You know, a lot of times it's like, you know, who took the money out of my purse? It's like, Grandma, I never asked you for it. No, I saw you have my purse. It's like, no, I ain't have your purse. You know what I mean? You may get a whooping or something, but the
Right.
effects can be so much more dire when you think about society as a whole. And so I really think that's interesting. What specifically, because this is what you defended, right? This is what you stood before the committee and had to like go through your PowerPoint slides about. What was, again, specific, some of the training that you all examined when you said to help prevent these type of things? Like what was it? Was it brain games, or like what was it?
So essentially, I had created this paradigm where people, for example, if you had a specific experience, I ask you not to just remember, oh, I went to the farm to pick up apples, but like I went
Hmm.
to the farm on this street on this day. I was wearing this clothes. I picked up green apples. So it's like a matter of paying attention to specific details, which is funny,
Yeah.
especially someone who has ADD. It was weird when I was
Yes.
training these people to remember details, because half the time I didn't even remember what they were supposed to remember. So, but essentially the key was paying attention to specific details and trying to
Got you.
relate it to something related in your life. So it wasn't so much
Got
just
you.
like trying to make it like an everyday thing that you can relate to, and actually recalling not just the general experience, but the specific details. Because a false memory is remembering the gist of something, the general idea of something. And so that way, if, you know, you remember you want to pick up green apples at Tate Farm on this day, you're also remembering the emotions you had that day. You're likely to remember the things around you, versus because there's probably multiple times you drove on that road. There's multiple times you went to that farm and you probably picked up vegetables, not apples that day. So, you know, so like remembering the specific details is key to, you know, being able to like get that like trigger to like, oh,
gotcha.
And it's like a trickle down effect. Like, oh, I remember.
So it helps to be detail oriented, or at least practice remembering details, because in essence, you're actually strengthening your real memories, and you're eliminating the opportunity to have these imaginary experiences that never really happen.
Exactly. Okay. It's more about strengthening those real memories, because although when we looked at the training, it didn't necessarily improve real memories, it just reduced false memories, because in the end, you have those real memories, you just are more likely to mix up real memories with similar memories. You know, because like are always so similar. We have the same thing. As much as we want to think our lives are diverse and we have so many different experiences, they're all related in some way, and it's easy to mix them up. Like so easy to mix them up.
Got you. No, y'all give her some hearts, give her some love. Shout out to people watching on YouTube. Make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't yet. I am with a cognitive neuroscientist from the Caribbean, representing the islands of Dominica. That's it, right? Dominica and Dominica, St. Croix, you know, we got Tortola. She's just representing the Caribbean for sure. Came to the States, got your PhD from Penn State. I think you did, if I'm not mistaken, you did like a post-bachelor's. You did like a little program in between.
Yeah.
In Pennsylvania as well. Pittsburgh, got you. You did a little bit more research. Then you went to Penn State, got your PhD. And then from there, you transitioned to, I believe, the position that you now hold, which is a postdoc, correct? Tell us about that.
So now I am a postdoc at Columbia in the Taub Institute, studying the aging brain on Alzheimer's disease, which ultimately was what I wanted to do. So in grad school, I studied healthy aging. So regular old people, white people. And more so, my ultimate goal was to study differences across race and ethnicity, but I couldn't do that which honestly, now that I'm doing that, thankfully I did not do that in grad school. I would not have the time or energy, honestly.
You should be in grad school. You'll still be in grad school right now.
I would still be in grad school.
Flat out, I feel you.
So now I'm studying essentially so in grad school, you can think of, I try to study this specific and like these parts of the brain responsible for a specific behavior. Now I'm studying how this whole system as a whole, from the aging process, kind of falls apart as disease progresses. So and how that looks different across race and ethnicity.
And you say it like this, just to kind of like give the terms. I'm gonna try to sound smart for a second. You said you're identifying life course socio-cultural mechanisms underlying disparities in the molecular, structural, and functional architecture of the aging brain. Did I get it right? Did I know that? And so that brings into a lot more than just the I guess looking at the neurons and things like that. You're looking at the experiences and how that may have had effects. So go ahead and break that down. You know, I think that brings in, discrimination and childhood education, all that. Go ahead, break that down.
Yeah, so essentially a lot of people study brain differences because everyone loves to say Black and brown people have smaller brains than other races, right? However, the key point is to say, like, okay, the brain may function differently within these racial or ethnic groups, but why is that? And often when you dig deeper, you're like, oh, well, because you see the people who, have smaller, or I don't want to say smaller, but different architecture, different molecular properties of the brain are, for example, Black and brown people. Okay, why is that? Well, these people live in a specific neighborhood. How does living in that specific neighborhood affect their brain? Well, the foods they eat, the access to, green spaces, the access to fresh, non-polluted air. Like, I think when someone from our lab had published some stuff saying that, for example, like in New York, I live in Harlem. And Harlem is right under that bypass where everyone from upstate New York drives to like the city. And so all that pollution, so Harlem, not to say like Harlem is poor, but who lives in Harlem? Black and brown people. And so pollution affects them because of where they live, but they can't afford to live upstate New York and drive into the city every day. So essentially it's kind of like more or less I like to think of what I study is kind of how racism becomes biological. So because of where you live, the foods you eat, all those things are because of systemic racism. And that literally shows differential effects on the brain, which looks like racism, because a lot of people want to say like, oh, you can't study racism. Race is a social construct. Yeah, but there's certain lived experiences that you have because of the color of your skin that affects your brain differently.
That is profound. That is profound. Y'all show some hearts if you are definitely like blown away by this information. I have Dr. Indira Turney right now telling us about neuroscience and again the socio-cultural mechanisms as it relates to neuroscience. I think I've heard you say one time that even like when you look at the South, people who were born in the South, and the way that their brain sort of age compared to people who may have been born in the North, even someone that may have been born in the South but moved up North, like even that proximity has something to do with it as well?
Yeah, there's definitely research where we've shown that, so you were born in the South, which is a disadvantage given, again, more racism, the education system, because again, all these things are, helpful for upward mobility. It depends on where you end up in later life, right? And so if you were born in the South and you decided for some reason you have some reason to move to the North, which is better life. But even still, when you compare to someone who was born and raised in the North, their brain development is still very different from yours because of early life experiences that you've had that affected your brain. Because these things happen from day one, like a lot of times, like I'm studying aging, but what I really love about what I do now is not so much studying, what is happening to you at age 40, 45, 65 and older. It's like, okay, I'm studying those things, but also what happened to you before, because at the end of the day, these are factors that can be modified. These are things that we can change if we change the system. So therefore, that happened to you because of just where you were brought up. Yes, you moved to a better life, but it could have been prevented, like if you had down in the South. So
Well, listen, as a person born and raised in the South, I am not going to take offense to your research. I am just going to say that it is very interesting that those factors can play a part. I like to think I was educated well down here, but I feel what you're saying.
Sure.
No, I got you.
Even when you think of like a Caribbean person, there's also like this.
Right.
I'm not Hispanic, but there's this Hispanic paradox, right, where that talks about like individuals who migrated to the United States, they have a better advantage, but after they've lived in the United States for long enough, again, going back to racism, it's about the environment that we live in the U.S. specifically, and this is why I'm all about like dismantling the system because it affects us in many ways that we don't realize.
Totally. Yeah, I was just joking. I definitely don't take offense. I definitely know where you're coming from. It's fantastic. Fantastic from the standpoint of fascinating. I think. And so often when we see things just in the health community as a large, right, we see things that affect Black and brown people more, not receiving the same attention, not receiving the same resources. We're not getting to the bottom of it that we should as a scientific community. But I think you would submit, and I would agree, that this is not only necessary for the Black and brown people that are being affected, but for everybody. Can you talk a little bit about that?
For sure. Like, I think that's the other thing that really pisses me off, because a lot of times people assume, you're studying Black and brown people because you're Black. I'm like, well, yeah, of course, one. But two, I think it's also, so for example, there's been a lot of clinical trials. So trials where people are trying to, cure Alzheimer's disease, and they have these specific medication or therapy approaches that's supposed to help people with Alzheimer's, and they all failed. Like, I think in 2019, 2018, there were like 5 clinical trials. And now by the time they get to the public of trials, now this is like 5-10 years of research in the making, and 5 or more of them failed. And what they were showing is that, well, the reason they're failing is because, one, the people who are most affected by Alzheimer's disease were barely represented in those studies. So if you're not studying the people who are most affected, then how are you expecting to find a treatment that actually works for everyone? So it's
to understand everything. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's not so much about, and then the other dimension to this is that Alzheimer's disease, a lot of people who don't study it just assume there's this like, oh, there's Alzheimer's disease. But when you actually study the people, and when you look at like plaques and tangles, like the actual objective measure that some group of people assume is Alzheimer's. So if you're in the world of plaques and tangles is what Alzheimer's is. Majority of the Black and brown people who claim to have Alzheimer's don't have as many plaques and tangles. So what does that mean? Do they not have Alzheimer's? Do they have a different kind of Alzheimer's is what some people try to say. No, we don't have a different kind of Alzheimer's. We just have something that y'all have not studied in the
different
right way,
impacts, different effects.
Exactly. So it may be the same thing. It just looks different, And so that was the issue. So it's not so much about, well, I'm studying Black people because I'm Black. It's that you have to study the people who are most affected in order to really understand the disease itself, and it helps everyone. I mean, America is all about the economy, and Alzheimer's is expensive to deal with. So if you have all these people with Alzheimer's and you're not dealing with them because you don't even actually understand the disease, you probably should involve everyone. And I'm not saying it's easy to study, Black and brown people, because we have a whole history of, abuse and research. So we don't trust
so many variables,
which is why we need more of us in the field. But at the end of the day, that's not an excuse to not do it, So
definitely. Yeah. Next time somebody says, oh, you're studying Black and brown people, you should be like, yes, you're welcome. It just helps you as well. Now y'all give her some hearts, give her some love. If you have any questions, this is fascinating stuff. If you have any questions, we definitely saw some. We're going to get into this. Matter of fact, this popped up real quick. So like understanding the different heart attack symptoms in women versus men. Okay. Exactly. It's like kind of in a similar way. Yeah, for sure.
There was this whole research for a while about like, for men, heart attack, these are the symptoms to expect. And then women would have these other symptoms and they're like, oh, you don't have a heart attack. And then in the end they do. But the reason was because men were involved in those studies.
Yeah, no, that's so important. That's so important on so many levels. And so, all the hearts came your way, definitely, for sharing that. I think that's really dope. I think it's really dope. I saw a question Teresa asked earlier, going back to, actually, before I get to that question, I had to make sure, I didn't want to stop you, but plaques and tangles, right? Like, I'm assuming you're talking about stuff that builds up on the neurons in the brain. He was like, plaques and tangles. And I was like, for real, yeah. Go ahead, decipher that just really quick.
The simplest form, plaques and tangles are just like proteins aggregating on different neurons, and once they aggregate on the neurons they're not supposed to, then the neuron dies. And so if the neuron dies, then you have less neurons to function in the brain, and so that causes different memory problems and other problems that they label as Alzheimer's disease.
Got you. And to your original point, you were saying that they have found that in, I guess, majority populations in the United States and a lot of white people, that they have higher amounts of that when they have Alzheimer's. But then in Black and brown people, we don't have the same amounts, though we may still have Alzheimer's. And they're saying, oh, this is a different kind. You're like, no, it's not a different kind. We just have additional factors that could be impacting it and bringing this about in our communities.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Precisely.
Oh, that's got it. We with you. Y'all give us some love. This is Dr. Indira Turney, my friend, my fellow, my island sister from St. Croix that I happened to be out there. We didn't meet when we were out there, but I at least saw the island.
You have not really crossed paths. What year was that again?
This is a while ago. This is, I don't know, early 2000s, I want to say, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah. But we got a question, and I see some coming in. Y'all get the questions coming, but Teresa just asked this question about 𝐩𝐚𝐬𝐬𝐞𝐬𝐞 yeah, I heard about really work for memory. Like, are they, like the stuff that people say, oh man, this is help your memory loss and stuff like that. Can you touch a little bit on those things?
Yeah, none of them work. That's not true. So like, for example, right? So like the study that I did for my dissertation was training you to have a specific method or approach to remembering things. Granted, this was like a 2-week-long training. Now, I didn't test it, so I'm not about to say in 6 years or even a year from now, this is going to improve your memory. For those 2 weeks, that helps your memory. And so all those things like like luminosity and all those. I mean, they were sued
Yeah.
for so many reasons because they promised you that if
They
you
promised,
play these
okay.
games, your memory
Yeah.
will improve. No, if you
Yeah.
play these games, you're gonna get better at these games. It's gonna seem like your memory improves,
Mm.
but actually, when you look at brain function, there's no difference, and you're actually the same. So that was a big, claim that a lot of people try to do. But there have been some studies out there. Again, it's kind of one of those things where you have to study within a domain. So if you study,
Okay.
if you teach people to have better memory on a specific thing, if it's recollecting details, then they will
Right.
be recollecting details
At that thing. Okay.
But that doesn't mean they're going to remember all of a sudden the medication that the doctor told them to take if it's 2 times a day versus 2 times a week. You know, like, does it transfer to those different kinds of things? And that's the issue with training, honestly, which is, thankfully, I don't do that kind of work specifically anymore because it's very messy. It's hard to train people to do a specific thing and expect it to, like, transfer to, like, their general lifestyle.
Everything. Yeah. Huh. That is interesting. Okay. Cool. Again, we got another question coming in. This one is from the Black Math Academy. And does Dr. Joy DeGruny's post-traumatic slave disorder relate to this? Are you familiar with that?
Certainly. I love her work. So it's not so much related to the work I did in grad school, or at least I don't know how it relates to that because that's more about just general memory functioning. The work that I do now, it's about how do you compare functioning from different racial groups, and a lot of, again, going back to your point, right? So like we may have different underlying neurological representations of what Alzheimer's look like across race and ethnicity. However, there's different driving forces that causes those effects, right? And so to Dr. Guy's point, I actually don't know if it's DeGruy or however you pronounce her name, but Dr. Joy, it's there's a lot of effects about post-traumatic slave disorder because that stress on Black people, like, it's not so much like, yes, you're testing us in this moment, in this time, but our lifestyles are very different from a white or another person from another race or ethnicity because that drives down. So a lot of times, like, it's hard for people to say, well, it's not genetics. So yes, we are, if you cut us open, we look the same, we function the same. However, our environment changes the expression of our genes. And so when you look at how our ancestors were stressed because of slavery and different experiences that they have, they pass that on genetically. And so yes, we're not genetically different, but stress-wise, we're genetically different.
Has an impact.
Exactly.
It has an impact.
This is a perfect example of how, again, slavery becomes biological. So yes, as a race, we're the same, but biologically, because we've experienced different slavery experiences or life experiences are different, biologically, we're different. But we're not different because, you know, like, some people want to say, well, Black people are different because they're Black. No. Our biology is different because of slavery. Y'all made us that way. It can be prevented.
It's a what's the word? Pathology of who we are as Black people, more so than just the very nature of being Black. No, that's
exactly.
That's deep,
a lot of times
man.
It seems like, oh, it's just because of who you are. You are naturally aggressive. You are naturally this. No, we are this. And we're not that way, first of all, but like anything to do with like, oh, we have higher rates of Alzheimer's. It's not because we're just bad people, whatever excuse they want to give. It's because we are experiencing more stress, and stress affects the brain very differently compared to other, stressors.
Man. This is serious. If y'all are enjoying this, give some hearts, give some love. Shout out to everybody watching on YouTube. Again, STEMedia on YouTube. If y'all don't know, my Instagram family, go to YouTube. There's some folks over there watching right now. Subscribe, like. We got Indira Turney, Dr. Indira Turney. This is just a long overdue postdoc at Columbia University. You've been dropping some gems, but just as a quick aside, matter of fact, hold on, I don't want to go there. Before I go there, I have one more question. Let me ask this real quick. I Heart Travel says, we see you. What can we do to offset some of the negative environmental factors that may have affected us neurologically? Yes, good question. I'm interested in this too. Given what you just shared, what would you recommend? And, I don't know if you could have to give a disclaimer or not, but just go ahead and give us an idea of what we can do.
Disclaimer, burn down the whole fucking system. That's what it is. Like, honestly, like,
Burn
like,
down
a
the
lot of
whole
times,
system.
like, yes,
Okay.
we can eat healthier. And, you know, as people of, you know, we've had a PhD, we have, you know, we do have a privilege, right? So yes,
Right.
I can afford better food options. Despite of where I live, I can afford to live in a better neighborhood. But as a collective, we cannot, because they prevent us from getting, you know, homeowner loans. They prevent us from living in specific neighborhoods. They prevent us from going to specific schools. So I mean, like, yes, now with all this like racial uprising, like, yeah, they've been allowing more people to be in different positions, but at the end of the day, like, we go to the hospitals and doctors treat us differently. So yes, we can do all the things we want, like, so Serena, Beyonce, all of them had complications. Why? Because of the color of their skin. It's not so much about the money you have in the, sadly, you can do a lot of things, yes, environmentally to help, but at the end of the day, if the system changes, it's not going to make that much of a difference, because the healthcare system treat you.
I'm hearing this
answer for that. Sorry.
No. No, it's honest answer. And I guess what I'm just hearing is that even if everything completely became equitable right now, today, because of just the factors over time, there's still a lot more that needs to be washed out. You know what I mean? And so, I definitely think this is deep.
Equality versus, you know, justice versus like equity. Like, yes, we can be on the same playing field, but my life experiences are very different from you. So yes, I have
the historical, the story, the journey, how I got to this playing field. You drove up in, you know, Bentley. I drove up in a, you know what I mean? Like, it's still a whole lot more to the story. And so, I appreciate your authentic, your genuine, it's just the real answers to that. I want to bring something in real quick, though, and this is slightly outside your area of expertise, but it did come up a little bit in just my research review and stuff, and that is, you are quite you have acquired skills of finesse in the area of personal finance, I understand. And I won't stay here too long, because Instagram definitely took kickers off at a hard stop, but this is great. You actually went into grad school with, I don't know, tens of thousands of dollars in student loan debt, but then you got your financial life in order. Just talk a little bit about, you know, what you have done and what you've learned in that regard. And then also, if you can, tie it to, I don't know, neuroscience or anything that you may have to connect it to. But I just wanted to ask you about that.
I'll try.
All right. Go ahead.
So I started grad school with like debt for like grad school, you know, medical bills. I think in the end, I probably paid off about like $60,000 or so in debt.
Before graduating.
Before graduating, I paid off my car as well, and a few. We never owe anyone money, period. And so just the fact that I knew that I owed people money was always like a stressor to me. But at the end of the day, I think like the way I paid that off was through applying to every bloody fellowship. Everything. If it said I was eligible or slightly eligible, I applied. And there were some things that I wouldn't have gotten that I've gotten. It's a numbers game. So apply to everything. And a lot of things, there were sometimes like if you go to conferences, they give you $70 a day or so for per diem. I probably spent like $20, $30 or ate with someone else for free. And so that's like $50 I could put towards, you know, paying for something else. And so I think a lot of it was so being, you know, cognizant of, yes, this is grad school, and for 6 years my life is the same, but I have debt waiting for me, and I didn't want to like be done with a degree and have debt waiting for me. And my grandmother always said, don't owe nobody money. So I was like, I won't owe nobody money. I will for a little bit, but I'm paying it off, right? And so I think as far as like tying it to neuroscience, I mean, I think it was more so about money. I don't know. Like, I mean, if you want to talk about like willpower, and like
and that's I guess maybe that way, like, is there a certain, I mean, it took discipline, it took a certain level of, like you said, willpower, like, is there anything for people, because here's the thing, like, there are those of us watching this right now, it's like, yo, $60,000, like, I've been working on that for like the last 10 years, you know what I mean? And it's like so much, right, that we kind of like end up finding ourselves wanting it, but then sometimes the mindset, it's not there or whatever. Maybe if you can give us a little bit of insight on that as it relates to what it takes.
A lot of times I feel like the big thing was a lot of time when we want to pay off debt, we suffer ourselves. So we're like, I'm going to pay off debt. I'm not going to eat out. I'm not going to, go on vacation. I'm not going to do any fun thing. And that's not sustainable. The way I paid off debt was I paid myself first all the time. So once I paid all my main bills, I also had like, this is Indira money, and the rest goes into paying debt, right? Because a lot of times we assume in grad school, I think a big thing too was that as Black and brown folks, we get into grad school and first of all, they're paying us to get a degree. That's new. So like we're like, you're giving me money? I'm not used to having money. And
Stipend?
now I know $20,000, $30,000 in grad school is little money, but to us at the time, that is big money. And I'm going to spend it on everything, forgetting my undergrad loans, forgetting all the other things that I've been in debt about. And so, no, I need to realize this is a fortunate opportunity to be able to like have the same bills for the most part for like 5 to 6 years. And if I'm able to like pay myself where I can still have fun, I can still travel, and whatever is extra, it goes to bills. But I am bound, not suffering, because otherwise I'm not going to want to like choose, to pay off student loan over going to visit a friend for a weekend, because that is also my mental health. But I'm going to visit that friend and not spend money on the clubs all weekend. I can cook, I can meal prep, so I figure out the things that are important for me to sustain a general happy lifestyle, and the rest things like eating out every day versus like twice a week it's not necessary for me to feel whole, like I don't feel a need for that, but I know paying off a bill is helpful, and it will actually help me live a more, less stressful life.
And like so you got into a habit. Back to
like one thing at a time. So you pay off a little thing here and you have a goal, you set a plan, these are the things you need to pay off in this order. Just do it. It may seem ridiculous, but just do it. Because in the end, when you look back, you're like, oh, these little steps actually made a difference. They may not feel that way right now. Make a plan, stick to it, and also have a life.
There you have it, y'all. Give her the hearts, give her the love. Guess what? I see people in there saying we gotta have a part 2, and I feel them like, yo, once you start dropping some gems on the financial literacy, they was like, oh snap, she got something else in her bag. Like, oh my goodness. So that is fantastic. I can definitely be
more specific on a follow up for sure.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna have to set something like that up. This has been great. Why haven't we done this before now, Indira? Like we should have been.
I know.
But it's all good.
I'm so glad I did. This is always like so amazing. So thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. I wasn't gonna say nothing, but you said it, man. Y'all, did y'all know she almost didn't come on tonight? Like this was this close to not happening tonight, y'all. Yeah, almost didn't get the gems. Like it was this close, but she came through.
I'm learning that it's not about me. It's about what I need to say for someone else, and I'm accepting it. So
I love it. So real quick, we're already kind of in overtime, but give us a little bit of what we can expect coming down the pike for Dr. Indira Turney, and then give us some parting words of wisdom before we say goodbye.
Yeah, I would say as far as expectations, it's really just, at this point, I'm just kind of like developing my independent research program as far as research goes, which is establishing my place in this disparities world, and not so much as just like figuring out the differences across race and ethnicity, but why we see those differences. Really, how does racism become biological? That's really my big thing. And also like bringing my full self and encouraging more people like us to bring those perspectives to the research, because there's a lot of people doing their research, but they're not necessarily looking at it from our perspective, because we're like, yeah, our brains are different, but it's not because we're less or inferior to y'all. There's reasons for this. They can be avoided. So that's kind of like a big thing. So like at this point, I'm applying for a K next year, so I'll be like within the next few years or so have like an independent lab is the goal. I'm still very much interested in academia. I know it's not the the sweet spot for a lot of people, but as of right now,
it's all good. We need you there. We need you there.
Yeah. And then as far as like parting words, I would say my big thing recently that I've been trying to like focus on is, well, 2 things. Discipline over motivation, because a lot of times we're motivated, we're like, okay, I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to study this project, I'm going to start out this new side hustle, I'm going to pay off these debt, but then the discipline isn't there. And because motivation goes and comes, and a lot of times to get things done, we need the discipline. You need to be consistent. And so try to think of like, make a plan, stick to it, and be disciplined about it, whatever that is, whether it's for a side hustle, your research program, exercise program, whatever it is, it's about discipline and not so much motivation. Because if you wait on motivation, it's very finicky. It goes and comes. Like today, right? I was like, I don't know, I'm not motivated to do this. I don't want to be there. I don't know, I got a lot going on. But like the discipline is like, I am here to share my story with other people and hopefully inspire one person, right? And so the discipline is showing up and doing my part. And whatever people get from tonight, I'm happy with it. And then the other thing is resting. I have been learning to rest. I am literally learning what it's like to rest and do self-care, because a lot of time we say we're doing self-care, but we don't know what that means. We say we do it, but do we actually feel self-care? Especially as, you know, PhD grad student, we intellectualize everything. I am meditating, but are we actually meditating? I am praying, I am listening, but are you actually being in the moment? A lot of times we intellectualize everything, and so I've actually been learning to feel what rest feels like and use that as a, when I'm resting, and I'm using that to fuel my work. So when I'm working, I'm working. When I'm resting, I'm resting, and thinking of resting as fuel to actually, when I'm ready to work, because I've rested, I am ready. And that has been transformative to me. And I've been using, I have a meditation group that I actually joined that's been supporting this with Dr. Tiffany Johnson. If you guys look her up on Instagram, she's amazing, and that has been helpful for me for sure. And I think that's the big thing for us, especially as Black and brown people. We're always in the go, we want to do. And so self-care is literally just another thing on our list to do. We're not actually doing it. So we need to actually learn how to rest and also learn the difference between discipline versus motivation.
Man. Listen, when a wise person speaks, you just gotta just be quiet sometimes and just take it all in. And that's what I did. So thank you so much, Indira. Y'all give us some hearts, give us some love. If you are watching on YouTube, I need y'all to leave a comment on your favorite part, because there's so much to pick from. You got to put your favorite Dr. Turney quote in the comments. But Indira, this has been a treat. This has been a pleasure. All ours. You know, that's what we do. That's why we have STEMedia Live, talk about motivation and discipline. I can't even say that I'm always motivated to do this every Sunday, but it is times like this that shows that the discipline is worthwhile, because I know for a fact a lot of people got a lot of value from what you shared, and we're gonna start working on that part two. We're gonna have to set a date for that part two.
Sure. Let's do it.
Yeah. Y'all give her some love. All right, y'all get some hearts. You see the hearts coming. Jennifer says the heart. Mudiwa. Yep. So thank you so much, Indira. I hope you have a wonderful week, and of course, just to affirm you again, I like to tell guests like yourself that I love what you're doing. I think that your work is not only necessary, but your mere presence, your mere existence in the space is necessary. And so I just affirm you. If there's anything I can do, STEMedia can do to support you and your work. You know, we're here, you know what I mean? And so continue to make a difference, continue to, you know, uplift all people through the work that you're doing. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate this thing.
All right, y'all. Thank y'all for hanging out with us. Again, STEMedia Live happens every Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Make sure y'all catch us